Alright guys, these are my top 10 favorite VR games of all time. Synapse is an FPS roguelike game that is exclusively on the PSVR 2. I actually ended up getting the platinum for this game, and I remember when this was first announced, thinking it looked pretty good, and I thought, nah, just play it for a few hours, but the game really sucks you in. Pause. No, the mechanics in Synapse are incredibly satisfying. It takes the cover system from Fract, but amps it up to a new extreme, allowing you to climb pretty much any surface in the game. The main mechanic of the game is using telekinesis, in cooperation with the combat, which gives you so many creative ways of taking down enemies. The fact that the game was built for the PSVR 2 means it gets to use all the headset's bells and whistles. All the haptics are there, the resistance in the trigger is used in a very clever way. The art direction of this game is outstanding. It's primarily set in black and white, but once you kill an enemy, a wave of colors are formed to make an abstract piece of art. The only thing that's really holding this game back is its length and story. The story is really just background noise, and for a roguelike, the game is pretty short, where you could easily beat the campaign in under 6 hours. You know, Robinson the Journey used to be my favorite VR game, primarily because of the vibes it gives you. I have never felt this immersed in a game, except for one game that we'll talk about later. The feeling of discovering something new as a child is brought into full focus in RTJ. Even though Robin doesn't have many lines in the game, you can tell that he's very curious and isn't afraid to get in a little bit of trouble. His companion, Laika, further motivates his motives to explore and to take risks. The dynamic between Robin, Laika, and Higgs, the robot companion, is so strong throughout the entirety of the game. Higgs, his whole purpose is to keep Robin safe, which is why he sees Laika as a threat to Robin's safety. But as the story progresses, Higgs starts to understand that a little bit of danger and curiosity isn't bad, of course with some precautions. One thing I feel like this game perfected was its world design and atmosphere. The soundtrack is one of my favorite gaming soundtracks of all time, and for being almost 8 years old, this game still holds up as one of the best looking VR games. The sound design is also incredibly immersive. The vibes of this game are just so incredibly unmatched, which is why I carried it to the 9th spot. Because the gameplay of Robinson the Journey is incredibly outdated, especially if you're playing on PSVR 1. The gameplay mainly consists of climbing, scanning, and moving objects with your multi-tool. There are really no VR interactions besides climbing, which is definitely outdated to a lot of other VR games that have been released in recent years. And the game sets itself up for a sequel, which I feel like would be needed to get this game higher on the list, but the game unfortunately wasn't received well enough to get one. At number 8, we have Song in the Smoke. Song in the Smoke is genuinely one of the scariest VR games I have ever played. And it's not even like the game is an actual horror game. The game's actual genre is survival. But the atmosphere, music, and creature design would say otherwise. Every time I play Song in the Smoke, I always feel on edge. Pause, no, because you never really know what's around the corner. And also, every single creature in this game is a threat. And the thought of losing all the supplies you have gathered to one of these beasts is terrifying. The game's art style really pops on PSVR 2. The resolution is crystal clear, and the overall hand-drawn art style is incredibly well done in this game. The music and sound design are all top-notch, and make sure to always keep you on edge. Pause, no, Song in the Smoke is incredibly big. Pause, no, taking upwards of 15 hours to complete. The only reason why I haven't played this game in a while is because of how terrifying the atmosphere of the game is, which is really the only horror that actually scares me. Jump scares and absurd designs and movements pale in comparison to anticipation in an uneasy kind of way. Speaking of horror that doesn't scare me, Father of mine, tell me where have you been? Resident Evil 8 VR is an action-adventure horror game. RE8 does have disturbing imagery in the way of absurd creature designs and overuse of blood, but the gameplay itself is far from being scary. It is truly more of an action game compared to its predecessor, RE7. There are a whole slew of guns to choose from. The game definitely takes heavy inspiration from RE4 in the way of having a merchant like RE4. The merchant gives you weapons, attachments, and certain items that will be beneficial to your journey. And the gameplay is incredibly fun and satisfying in VR. For being a port to VR, they did an exceptional job of making the game feel made for VR. Small interactions like unlocking a gate door are done very well in RE8. This game also has a ton of action set pieces that are incredible to experience in VR. The boss fight with Lady Dimitrescu will always be a highlight for me. It's also good that the story is pretty solid, and I absolutely love Ethan as a protagonist. I feel like he's the most underrated main Resident Evil character in a game to date. Overall, I had a very fun time playing this game. Now, if you've played Boneworks, you either love it or you hate it. In this case, I love it. Some people aren't a fan of how taxing Boneworks' movements are, but I feel like that can be solved after a matter of time of playing VR. All of Boneworks' mechanics are incredibly solid, and there's a lot of game to it, which you don't see in a lot of like early VR games, and this was an early VR game. Well, sort of early. It was like released 2019, 2018, but a lot of the things showed in preview videos have never been seen in any other VR game, which is why Boneworks is so special, because it will not hold your hand in the game. The levels are very abstract and have a weird kind of design to them, which requires you to explore and try them out. Now, some people might classify Boneworks' level design as kind of just lazy and crappy, but I think it allows the player to use its imagination to solve certain environmental puzzles. All the weapons in Boneworks feel amazing. The physics is a definite highlight. I feel like if they didn't get that right, then the game would probably be trash. The soundtrack is outstanding. I absolutely love Boneworks' soundtrack, but the story itself is kind of garbage. That's another problem that BoneLab had, but I feel like Boneworks' level design is way better than BoneLab's, which is why it's higher on the list. And the reason that Boneworks is ahead of the 4 previous titles is just because it pushes VR to its limits, and not just mechanically, but the actual player itself. Like, yeah, sure, you'll get disoriented sometimes, even for a veteran VR player. I personally love Boneworks so much, and I'm kind of sad that BoneLab didn't really live up to my expectations. I still like BoneLab a lot, but I have way more fond memories of Boneworks' campaign than I did with BoneLab. Asgard's Wrath was the first true AAA RPG in VR. Over 20 hours of content, beautiful worlds to explore. The weapons felt amazing to use in the game. Their take on Norse mythology is absolutely gorgeous. All the characters are filled to the brim with personality. Since our games really know how to stylize a world. Now, the gameplay can get a little bit repetitive, and since the combat isn't physics-based, it's not going to be for a lot of people, because the combat is mainly based on parrying, but I absolutely love doing that in VR, so that didn't bother me at all. The story itself is pretty good. It's not bad. I think it's better than Boneworks. It's a pretty straightforward story, but I think anybody who picks this game up is going to be absolutely surprised on how much content there is in it. This game could be classified as quantity over quality, but I feel like the quality is honestly matched with the amount of content that's actually in the game. Gameplay really reminds me of God of War. Graphics I also feel like are on par with God of War. The soundtrack is really good, reminds me of God of War. This is basically your God of War in VR, minus the story aspect. Even though Asgard's Wrath does have a story, it's nowhere close to the point of God of War's story. Vertigo 2 is one of the most impressive games I have ever seen ever, because it is made by one person, which is insane that one person can make one of the best VR games ever made. The soundtrack of this game is outstanding. The weapons are super original and really fun to use. The campaign is around 12 hours long. There's good voice acting. The whole game is filled to the brim with creativity. A lot of people compare it to Rick and Morty, just the style of the characters, which I can definitely see, but the gameplay itself is very reminiscent of a Half-Life game, which the developer himself classified it as a Half-like. And the fact that the game has a sandbox mode where you can create your own levels and share them online, it's just so cool. I have so many fond memories in Vertigo 2. There's a lot of cool set pieces that happen, and it still baffles me that one person made this game. It was definitely my game of the year last year, and I cannot wait to see what Zach, the developer of the game, has in store. Now, a lot of you are probably thinking, oh, this should probably be number 1, which I understand because this game is considered the best VR game of all time, at least across the internet. Now, I went into this game knowing this information, so I had my expectations extremely high, which is probably why it didn't get number 1. If I went into this game thinking, okay, this is gonna be good, but not the best VR game of all time, it might have been put differently on the list. But besides that, Half-Life Alyx is extremely good. I like Half-Life Alyx's soundtrack more than Robinson the Journey, primarily because of Anti-Citizen. That track goes so hard. Pause. No, this game is also terrifying. Like I said with Song in the Smoke, it really builds tension and anticipation. There's not too many outright jump scares, and I feel like the head crabs are the only actual things that creep me out. The whole section with the poisonous head crabs and you're kind of in like a hotel will always be stuck in my brain. I'm pretty sure I just like gained OCD from that. And the part with Jeff is one of the greatest moments I've experienced in gaming. That part is so memorable. I just want to take a second to talk about this part of the game because every single time I think of Half-Life Alyx, I think of the Jeff part. Now, this kind kind of happens midway through the game. You're not really expecting it at all. Jeff is basically an incredibly strong monster that is just terrifying to look at. But the thing is that Jeff doesn't have any eyes, but he has extremely good hearing. And so the situations that they put you in with Jeff are some of the most terrifying things I've experienced in VR. After the Jeff section, I definitely classified Half-Life Alyx as a horror game because the amount of tension and anticipation that part builds is extremely high. And it just keeps going too. You think you're gonna beat him this time? Nope, you gotta do this. Think you're gonna beat him this time? Nope, you have to get these 3 power cells. Overall highlight of the game, which is why Half-Life Alyx is one of the best VR games of all time, but not better than our number 2 spot. Now this basically is just Asgard's Wrath, but 100 times better. Besides the graphics, because Asgard's Wrath 1 was released for PC VR, and the sequel is released exclusively for Quest, specifically Quest 2 and Quest 3. Asgard's Wrath 2 has way more set pieces, has one of the coolest beginning sections of all time that I've experienced in any media, that being movies, video games, books, and same goes for the ending of the game. Both those 2 parts are so memorable, but the actual game itself are also filled with a ton of other set pieces. The combat is way better than the first game. You don't have to parry this time. The game is now open world, which the first game was not. You have mounts now, you can craft, you can cook, there are secret mini bosses. There is just so much content in this game, and I have well over probably 50, 60 hours of this game. I just could not get enough of it. Asgard's Wrath 2 is a system seller, in my opinion, for the Quest 2 and Quest 3. The story has also gotten a huge upgrade from Asgard's Wrath. I still don't think it's as good as like Half-Life Alyx or Vertigo 2's, but it's definitely got a lot more heart and emotion to it. You get a strong connection to some of the characters, and some of them might die. The creativity from Vertigo 2 and the weapons are also brought over to the weapons in Asgard's Wrath 2. Some of the characters you'll unlock have some crazy abilities, which really separates the game up. It makes that 90 hours feel like just a few minutes. Okay, that was capped, but it goes by super fast. Asgard's Wrath 2 used to be my favorite VR game of all time, but I just played a game not even that long ago. I'm not even technically finished with the game, and that is Lone Echo is it's just amazing. This part has no script to it. It's just gonna be my thoughts on the game, because I've just been playing it and I cannot stop thinking about it. This is one of the greatest stories I've experienced in any game. Half-Life Alyx story pales in comparison to Lone Echo's, in my opinion. The same vibes that I get from Robinson the Journey are brought to Lone Echo, but kind of in an eerie way, which is why also Song of the Smoke's vibes are also brought to Lone Echo. In the game, you are set in space, so the movement is 0 gravity, so you get to pretty much touch any surface in the game and kind of push yourself towards things, pull yourself towards things. It's just incredibly intuitive, but that's not what makes the game great. What makes the game great is its story, its atmosphere, its music, its environment, its environmental storytelling, and just the overall vibes that I get from playing it. I've gotten way more chills in this game than I have in any other game. Exiting Chronos 2 to a vast open space that you're pretty much freely to kind of go from one place to another is just so cool. And I kind of touched on the sound design, which there isn't too many sounds that are actually in the game. The game is actually pretty silent because, well, you're in space, which makes every occurrence of sound sort of comforting. It is truly one of the best looking games I've ever played in my life. I've caught myself so many times just sitting there staring out in space. You can see different planets and they have all the names. You can see Earth. The planet we're closest to is Saturn. And seeing all the rocks formed around the rings of Saturn is just truly breathtaking. The lore and the story of this game is just so well done. But you have to go into this game with the right mindset. You have to go into this game knowing that it's a slow game. If you don't like a slow game where it's very focused on storytelling, environmental storytelling, and the feeling that you get from it, you will not have a good time while playing this game. The first time I played this, I kind of got bored. It was like a few years ago. I got bored from playing it. And I just recently went into it with a fresh mind. And then I was hooked. Your character Jack, which is an AI robot, has a companion, Liv. I have never felt this sort of dynamic between 2 characters ever. I understand that the whole AI and human connection has been overused a lot, but the way it's done in this game is so interesting because you are the robot. You are in his body. Liv's character starts to question if the AI has some sort of human to it, which, like I said, has been done before multiple times. But if you think about it, it does have some human to it because you, a human, are playing as the robot. It's just weird to think about. I don't think the game would have been as impactful with its story if I played as Liv, because, spoilers, Liv goes missing after the massive anomaly appears, right? And then your character is looking for Liv. You want to find her because you have grown this attachment from the beginning 3 hours of the game, which is this great parallel with the robot itself. You feel like the robot also is feeling like, oh, I need to find Liv. It's really strong. It's really, really well done. I haven't beaten the game, so I have no clue what happens. But another thing I want to touch on are the vibes of Lone Echo. I touched on how Robinson the Journey had amazing vibes to the game. And like I said, Lone Echo surpasses that, but also in an eerie way. You get that sense of discovery, but it feels off. After you actually make your way towards the anomaly ship, you will realize that this ship is massive, and inside the ship is a very abstract design. Oh my gosh, the vibes of this game are unmatched. Just thinking about it. Going on that Fury and then traveling through the ship, I just remember looking off into there. I'm like, this is so... I was speechless. Like, I just couldn't think about anything else. But I feel like you really got to get your mind into the mindset of, like, thinking, oh my gosh, this is so weird. We are discovering something new. We are discovering this alien, maybe alien ship. This was a sense that I got from Robinson the Journey, but was never fully, like, to this point where it's like, oh my gosh. Lone Echo, I'm so excited to finish it and play the sequel. It is just an experience like no other. It feels super personal. So it's like I made this video primarily just to get this off my chest. But the reason why I made it a top 10 video is because how all the other VR games pale in comparison pretty much to the vibes I get from Lone Echo. Lone Echo's soundtrack is gorgeous. There's like 4 tracks. Like I said, since the game's set in space, they want you to really feel like you're in space. So having music in the background might ruin the immersion a bit. The main theme just goes so hard in this game, holy cow. It is a true masterpiece. It is a true AAA VR game. I don't know, it's way ahead of its time. This game came out like 7 years ago, which is incredible. This, oh my gosh. This is what VR gaming should be. This is what it should be. I cannot wait to finish the game and then get on to Lone Echo 2. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching this video where I pretty much yapped the whole entire time. My voice is killing me now because I've been talking for 40 minutes straight, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace and bye-bye.